Yeah, that was the last speaker, and I think we have a lot of time for Q&A. Who'd like to ask the first question? And name the person, the speaker you would like to answer your question. Yeah. Yes, sir. You may want to identify yourself.
I'm Robert Lau, and I'm an associate editor for the council. We had a meeting with the council, and one of the issues that came up is this pie chart of the participation. And one of the areas that has very little participation are the city or the government participants. And so my question is to Kaizer. Do you see with the streetscapes and with this vision for what the streets should become, do we need more participation from government officials or those who can have this long term instead of just specific projects or specific developers that can do this kind of development for the very long term and to see these projects all the way through to completion?
Yeah, maybe may I have the four speakers to maybe stand up front so people will, the other three as well. Yeah. Please, thank you. No, on the podium. Yeah.
Robert, the easy answer is yes. But I would say that besides the government, I think also community participation, because the government is truly representing the community. And to the extent that the community can be involved and shape the vision so that it's not a self-referential vision of the property owners or the architects who are designing it, but it's truly a community-driven process. And I think the form-based code offers that platform where the public can interact with the government and with the private developer to create places, create visions that represent their desires, not just the private desire. So the answer is yes, I think government needs to be involved because they're truly involved and the operation and the maintenance of the public realm belongs to the government sector.
Any other question, or any one of the speakers may want to add something? Yes, Stefan.
I believe in China the awareness of the government now with regard to the people has dramatically increased. I think there's a lot more sensitivity towards new developments, how it impacts on the surrounding, how it impacts on people which might need to be relocated. I think there is a much greater level of sensitivity, and actually to an extent where we were always very amazed how quickly projects can be delivered in China. But I think now there is much more awareness, public awareness, and that also has sometimes a bit of an effect now on how these projects do get delivered. I think that Kinki is the KK100 is a very interesting example of how inner city areas could be developed, where a joint venture is formed between the people who live there and the developer, and everyone can benefit from that. And I think that model would also be interesting for India, because I know in Mumbai there's this problem with multiple ownerships and really stops any progress, it seems. But if everyone who is participating, if they could benefit from that, then I think that would be a really interesting way forward.
Another adding point, like the Chengdu Suning Plaza. I mean, frankly, most time these days, the China government, they pay a lot of attention to the images. But when it comes to the zoning requirement, a lot of them really not necessarily address the new needs. Like Chengdu, it is a very expensive land area. And if you do the original setback requirement, you don't have much left for the ground floors. So we and the owner talk to the client, talk to the city, and explain how important, again, not only about the value of the land, but also how to interact with the pedestrian to the shopping experience. You don't want too much setback for shopping street because people lost interest in approach to that. So this kind of, as long as you lay out with the reasonable reason, and they'll accept that and allow us to, again, move the building back all the way to the street property line. So this kind of things can be discussed, and I wish they can take more leadership, anticipate that, yeah.
You want to add, John? You want to add something? Next question, please. Yes.
Chaz Pope from Arup. It's another question for Kaizer, actually. I really liked the approach you had to the form-based planning and addressing developments from a public level. However, one concern I had is it looks like it may become even more restrictive for the later stages. And you mentioned that Miami already has this system in place. I'd be very interested to know what feedback you're getting from building designers to the form-based codes.
I want to make sure I heard, because I was squinting as the lights were shining in my eye. Could you repeat the first part of the question again? Sorry about that.
Yes, it was basically that while it seems a very good idea to take the public realm into account when coming up with the planning regulations, there seems to be a risk that the final implementation plans could become very, very detailed, which could potentially stifle innovation. So I'd just be interested to know what feedback is already coming where it's in operation.
Well, I think the example that I shared, and I did not work on the Miami code, I just used it as an example. But Miami did something real unique, and this is really because big cities have big budgets. Not every city has the opportunity that Miami does, but they had real opportunity to engage 3 national architects in the United States to design and test drive the code. And the example that I shared, all of the 3 architects came up with buildings that allowed for more, not limited creativity, but more intensity, allowed for more density, allowed for more creative variations. It's just having good regulations, because for the regulations that we have now are density-based and are FAR-based. And these FAR-based densities are essentially cloaked with a skin. So they're not creating the public realms that we desire. The form-based code is focused on the public realm, on the streets that are very often undesigned, on the open spaces that are not designed. So the focus is not so much on the design of the building and the details of the building, but those portions of the building, the public frontages of private buildings that shape the public realm. So it's a very limited focus in terms of how it impacts what you can actually do with the building. It allows for a lot of creative interpretation. I just shared a few of those interpretations. So the jury's still out, but I think because the code's just been out for now 2 years, but there are 2 projects, one designed by KPF and another one by Architectonia that's just going through the form-based code. And the feedback that we've received is pretty positive.
Next question. Yeah, Professor.
I actually have 2 questions. One is, how can we ensure the success of these schemes? In terms of buildings, we used to make buildings without knowing the result of their use by the end users, but we started to do post-occupancy evaluation and building evaluation. Is there a way to do research on the quality of the urban life that will be produced by these projects as compared to the previous experiences of people? And the second question is, where is people participation in the design stage? I see no participation from the actual end users in the design process. We are creating utopia without knowing the end result or participation from end users in making them.
John may want to answer that.
I'll try to answer. You asked a very good question in terms of, I answered the second question first in terms of public participation. I would say that in the emerging country, Asia particularly, a lot of the public participation is not there at all. So the success of those projects really has to consider the designer who encounter those projects. Usually you have certain regulation and you hold by that and trying to develop the design around this set of code. I think in the North America, especially in US and in Canada, for example, the public participation is by far one of the most important aspects. In fact, sometimes to the point where it drives development away because it makes it so costly. The big thing in California is, entitlement. You don't have a project until entitlement. It takes sometimes project we work on 6-7 years. We had one project where I went to literally at 100, public hearing, and where every interest group, bikers, jogger, pedestrian, grandmothers, they come and they basically participate in a very open way. It's good because it really put us on the toes, but on the other hand, it's really stifled development because it's so expensive. So I think that somewhere there's got to be a balance. And I find that, in fact, I was maybe perhaps answer one of the earlier questions is that I find Vancouver, Canada, and even Toronto now, has some of the best, what I call, control by the public sector. Because these codes are written not by bureaucrats. They are actually written by planner, designer that is on the field. They really staked out something very reasonable. How much pedestrian space, how much open space, where some of the important urban design axes you need to consider, so that you are not just building a wall and then everybody in the back, loses view or values. So I think there's a lot more what I call mature development. I look at, for example, Pudong. It really should be totally redesigned, because the urban design doesn't work. And in order to get there, you have to drive and so forth. Pedestrian is non-existent, in terms of trying to really go from one site to another. And they don't have street edge because everything's set back so far because they're based on the tower regulation. So I think there's a lot to be learned from that. And I think what we try to do when we work on these projects is challenge those codes. Even in China, they tell us 33% green space. What does that mean? So I think we have to be working smart and work with them. And hopefully, I don't know, maybe in the future, public participation will be an important part in China planning. But at this point, it's not. And then they're doing a lot of that type of project right now, which really, I think, if they hit it right, it's right on. If not, it's unfortunate. So that's something that we designer has to be constantly, ask the question, how do we can make a better project sensitive to the public, on people, not just the developer and the major user, but in fact, everyday citizen, visitor who comes to this place. How do they go to the front door? What kind of experience they're going to have?
Just two comments, because I think the points that you raised are incredibly important. One on public participation. The public participation in the West is not a perfect system. When you call public participation, it's largely the stakeholders that get involved. Stakeholders that operate at the two extremes. They're either for it or they're against it. They're representing certain key segments of the society, rather than the middle, which is, if you look at the bell curve, the majority of the people are in the middle. So I think John's absolutely right. In developing countries, and particularly in India and China, you don't have the community participation process that you typically do in the West. But I think there might be something to be learned from the process that exists in Western Australia, for example, where you don't really work with the stakeholders, people who are living right next to the property, who have an axe to grind, or people who have specific agendas, but the community participation comes from a jury system, just as we have jury systems in in a court trial, you would actually pick representatives of that larger middle of the bell curve to provide input, to provide feedback on projects. So I throw that out as something that can be pursued or certainly considered. The other part of your question, I think, is very central, and I think it's important, particularly as CTBUH and the other two alphabets or three alphabets are tall buildings in an urban habitat. The urban habitat is incredibly important, and post-evaluation of projects that get built, projects that you saw today, is incredibly important. This is something that perhaps the CTBUH can research. All of the award winners that are being handed out awards over the past years that are lauding some of the urban aspects. What are the learning moments from those projects, and share it with a larger audience? So I think that's incredibly valuable question, incredibly valuable research that can be done by CTBUH to help others to learn from those mistakes or errors.
Talking about how you evaluate some of these projects, I think we've been trying to do some research on this, but it becomes very quickly very complicated. How efficient are these buildings, and how much when you have a denser urban fabric, how much do we benefit from that, and how much is the footprint reduced, the carbon footprint? But there are some factors which are available and which are measurable, like, for example, car ownership. I mean, Hong Kong is I think, a fantastic example. Only 10% of people own cars in Hong Kong, and in fact, the public transport system is so convenient that, and you can reach literally every place. There is really not much need for cars there, and that's because of its density. So that means, in turn, you need to build less roads. You have less commuting. You have within these dense developments a better circulation, so people don't necessarily have to from their flats, don't have to commute that far to the office spaces. You have schools, for example, within close proximity. These kinds of densities make cities so much more efficient, and I think that can be measured. That can be measured.
Next question. Yeah. Yes. May I enter? Maybe we only have about 8 minutes. Maybe we can cluster together 3 questions and let them answer it. If there are any other questions, just after you another question, so they can all answer the last 3 questions.
Okay, I have only one question. Thank you.
Go ahead.
And I'm Tony Wong from Yuanda, China. We are a curtain wall company. We have some cooperation before with some architect, like Farrells in KK 100 in Shenzhen. We do that. My question is, in China, normally the project has a very, very tight schedule, very tight program. So that might cause the losing of the quality. So my question is, I think the speakers all have the experience how to deal with the tight schedule and the quality, the conflicting. Do you have any idea? Thank you.
Tight schedule and tight program. Any more questions? 2 more questions, and the speakers will answer all of them. No more? All right, go ahead.
I'll start off just on site work, okay, and then my colleagues here can talk about building or other in terms of quality. You're asking about questions really about tight schedule. Well, I think there's a lesson to be learned on that. I think China is trying to emerge as in the 21st century to really trying to catch up with the rest of the world, which they're doing in a tremendous pace. But given that type of schedule and so forth, there's a price to be paid. I do think that projects with good intention, good idea, needs good execution and quality of construction. It's really sad that the amount of money they spend, and sometimes because of the expedience of some, we got to get this open by Chinese New Year, and so they put thousands of people working on it. And it's unfortunate because I do think that those projects eventually, will function well if it's designed properly, but it will fail because the quality, they're going to have to come back. And I would say China in 20 years, if you're a contractor, there's going to be lots of projects for do-over or repair. One of our things we're trying to overcome that is that for landscape is even harder sometimes because usually building takes the bulk of the time to build. At the last 3 months, they're trying to put all the site stuff together to clean it up. So we actually recently opened an office in Shanghai for that reason, not because we want more work. We really want more quality. We want to spend more time. China has tremendous manpower, and therefore they have the ability to put projects together by using a lot of people, except a lot of them are literally non-skilled craftsmen. And unlike in the US or in other country, you have tradesmen, you have a mason, you have a carpenter. Well, China, that person, individual, maybe a farmers. And so we actually, the way we try to build better project, we do a system where we would ask for mock-up, design, construction mock-up. We would say, this section of the pavement, we want you to build that. So we would basically approve it on site. And hopefully they were able to follow that as a sample to apply that throughout the entire project. So we met with some success, but it's still got a long way to go. And we put people there almost full time during construction to make sure the construction, teach them how to basically, put a joint, mortar, because it lacks that type of quality. So that's for the site work, but, anybody want to talk about it?
Yeah, I look at, I would say even 6-7 years ago, you probably, it's even more serious issue, the quality, because a lot of clients pay a lot of attention to speed and also to the fees. So they don't want foreign architects spend much time developing the schemes. So a lot of them just finish in the schematic phase. But these days we find out more and more clients really looking for the quality because they know in order to be competitive, they need the quality. So they really like the idea. We always propose continue involved in the project after DD phase, continue engage in the construction documents, like period review, and also in the CA phase, we are continually involved in the site visit. And most clients accept that idea these days, which is great news for the quality. And of course, if I look at it from our side, we also probably ideally, you want to start with choosing the right clients and the right partners. They pay attention to quality. This, with the track record of pay attention to quality, include the local and design institute, which is very critical in order to carry through the quality. And of course, the vendors like Yuanda, have a great reputation, experience in doing this kind of high-rise curtain wall systems. And yeah, that's what I can add.
I agree with John. I think the fact that now many clients involve us throughout the whole process of the design until completion, that helps towards quality. But as far as Yeunda are concerned, maybe I can make my personal observations. When we came to Hong Kong first, our projects were primarily in Hong Kong, and obviously the facade and the envelope of the building is very important to architects. And we always had the opportunity to work very closely during the design stage with the curtain walling consultants and develop details with them already at that stage. Now the risk for the curtain walling contractor is he might not win the project. So he's made an investment. He might even be worried that other people benefit from his ideas. But what it did mean is that the curtain walling systems were considered in a much more realistic fashion. And in recent years, unfortunately, that opportunity, we didn't have that to the same extent because maybe partially a communication issue, but also I think it's not so readily available anymore, these discussions with facade consultants. So that is something I would like to encourage you to try to still offer that kind of idea, to develop the design with the help of the contractor already at early stages. And that will give us better quality buildings, I'm sure. Thank you.
Any more questions? We still have 4 minutes if I make some comments. Maybe the take-home value of this session, and thanks to the speakers and the participation here, there was a school of thought, maybe when we were in school, that activate the street life at the street level. And what we saw here, they have successfully done by design, upgrading, uplifting to the upper floors, the public realm. And we saw it here, I think it was successfully done. And then many of our codes are written in text form, where lawyers misunderstand each other or contractors. What we saw here, they are drawn. So very little mistake for interpretation. It's there. And then the full integration and with transportation, not just the architecture. We learn it here. Density. We are now 7 billion people on Earth, and from learning school also, using the density of Hong Kong, all of us can all fit the 7 billion in the state of Texas. Thank you very much, and let's put our hands together to thank the speakers and thank everyone to be here with us. And thank you to